The night the sea began to lie. October 11th, 1942. 23:32 hours. Off Cape Esperance, Guadalcanal. Iron Bottom Sound. The ocean is black tonight. No moon, no stars, just a flat, endless void broken only by the faint hiss of water sliding along steel hulls. A warm Pacific wind brushes across the bridge of USS Helena, carrying the smell of oil, salt, and cordite residue, still clinging from earlier drills. Lieutenant Commander William J. Red Rogers grips the bridge railing, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Somewhere out there, hidden beyond sight, beyond instinct, Japanese warships are moving at flank speed. You can't see them. You can't hear them. But Helena knows exactly where they are. Below decks, in a cramped compartment lit by a dull green glow, a radar operator leans forward over his scope. His headset crackles softly. Contact, multiple returns, bearing 270, range 23,000 yards. The screen blooms with ghostly white marks, sharp, unmistakable. Not sea clutter, not weather. Ships. Enemy ships. The operator swallows. Con, this is solid. I count at least 3 cruisers. Possibly more. On the bridge, Roger stiffens. He turns toward Captain Gilbert Hoover, his voice controlled but tight. Sir, radar confirms multiple surface contacts. Japanese formation. They're coming straight down the slot. Hoover doesn't reach for binoculars. There's nothing to see. Instead, his eyes settle on the radar repeater beside the chart table, an unassuming box of dials and flickering lines that many senior officers still don't fully trust. But tonight, it's telling the truth. Distance? Hoover asks. Closing fast, Rogers replies. And sir, they don't know we're here. That sentence hangs in the air like a loaded gun, because the Japanese Navy believes it owns the night. Or at least, it always has. For decades, Japanese commanders trained for darkness, optical sights, star shells, night torpedo attacks. They took pride in it. They laughed at the idea that Americans, loud, inexperienced, blind at sea, could ever fight effectively without daylight. Radar? A gimmick. A toy. No real sailor trusts a box. Out in the darkness, the Japanese column moves confidently, unaware. Heavy cruisers cut through the water in perfect alignment, gun crews relaxed, captains trusting eyes and optics that have never failed them before. They believe the Americans are blind. On Helena, the mood is different. Quiet, focused, charged. The radar operator speaks again. Contacts now at 19,000 yards. Course unchanged. Hoover turns slowly toward the plotting table. They're sailing right into us. Someone mutters under their breath. Poor bastards. Below the bridge, deep inside Helena's armored belly, gun crews stand ready at their stations. Breeches closed. Shells stacked. Fire control computers hum softly, fed not by eyesight, but by invisible waves bouncing off enemy steel. Radar-directed fire control, a phrase most Japanese officers dismiss as nonsense. On Helena, it's about to rewrite naval warfare. Hoover lifts the phone to the gunnery officer. Stand by, prepare to open fire. Radar solution only. A pause. Then the reply, steady, calm. Aye, sir. Solution locked. Rogers stares into the darkness ahead. Still nothing to see. No flashes. No silhouettes. No warning. Just black water. And somewhere inside the ship, an American fire control computer finishes its calculation. The sea doesn't know it yet, but in less than a minute, it's going to erupt. October 11th, 1942. 23:41 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal. The first salvo doesn't announce itself with sound. It announces itself with light. A sudden white-orange flash erupts from USS Helena's forward turrets, slicing through the darkness like lightning. The concussion slams into the bridge a split second later, rattling windows and vibrating steel beneath everyone's boots. 8-inch shells tear into the night. Radar-guided, calculated, invisible until impact. Lieutenant Commander Rogers instinctively ducks, then looks back out at the Black Sea. Still nothing to see, but far out in the darkness, Something explodes. A towering column of flame punches skyward from the Japanese cruiser Furitaka, its bow suddenly lit like a funeral pyre. Men are thrown from the deck. Shrapnel screams outward. A second explosion follows, brighter and angrier. On Helena's bridge, there's a moment of stunned silence. Someone whispers, "Direct hit." The radar operator's voice crackles over the intercom, sharp with disbelief. "Con, confirmed hit on lead cruiser. Multiple impacts. She's burning." Captain Hoover doesn't celebrate. He doesn't even move. "Maintain fire," he says calmly. "Shift targets. Radar bearings only." Another salvo erupts. Then another. Helena's guns fire with machine-like precision, each burst timed perfectly with updated radar solutions. Fire control computers feed corrections faster than any human eye ever could. Out there, the Japanese formation is already breaking apart. They never saw the Americans, never saw the muzzle flashes until shells were already tearing through steel. On board Furitaka, Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka is thrown against a bulkhead as the deck lurches violently beneath his feet. Emergency lights flicker on, bathing the passageway in sickly red. "What hit us?" someone shouts. No one answers. Lookouts rush to their stations, binoculars sweeping wildly across the Black Sea. Nothing. No ships. No gun flashes. Just darkness. Then another shell slams into the cruiser's superstructure, detonating ammunition lockers and shredding the bridge. Fire roars through ventilation shafts. Orders dissolve into screams. On another cruiser, Oba, officers stare in disbelief as splashes erupt around them, perfectly spaced, marching closer with terrifying precision. "How are they ranging us?" an officer shouts. There's no visibility. The captain grips the rail, eyes wide. "It's the Americans' radar," he mutters. "They can see us." Back on Helena, Rogers watches the radar repeater. "Enemy ships maneuvering erratically," he reports. "They're breaking formation." Hoover nods once. They've lost control. And that's when the real horror sets in. Because Japanese night doctrine, built on precision, coordination, and optics, falls apart without visibility. Orders are delayed. Signals are missed. Ships turn blindly, some crossing firing arcs, others nearly colliding. And the Americans? They're calm. They fire when the radar says fire. They adjust when the screen updates. They don't need eyes. Another American cruiser joins in. Then another. The darkness fills with explosions, orange fire blooming across black water. Steel screams. Men burn. On Aoba, a shell tears through the bridge, killing the gunnery officer instantly. Blood splashes across the plotting table. "This isn't possible," someone whispers. But it is. The Americans aren't guessing. They aren't firing blindly. They're hunting. The radar operator on Helena leans closer to his scope, voice steady now, almost cold. "Con, enemy cruiser slowing. Severe damage." Hoover exhales slowly. "Cease fire on that target. Shift to the next." Rogers feels a chill crawl up his spine. Because in this black, moonless sea, the Japanese Navy is learning something too late. The night no longer belongs to them, and the sea has started telling the truth. October 11th, 1942, 23:49 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal. The water ahead of USS Helena boils with white splashes as enemy shells finally begin to fall, but they land wide. Too wide. The Japanese gunners are firing blind, guessing at ghosts. On Helena's bridge, Lieutenant Commander Rogers watches the spray erupt harmlessly off the port bow. "They've got our general direction," he says. "But they can't range us." Captain Hoover doesn't even look up from the radar repeater. Because they still can't see us. Below decks, the radar room hums like a living thing. The scope sweeps. Blips pulse steadily, shifting as the Japanese ships scatter in confusion. "Con, enemy cruiser turning hard to starboard. Speed dropping," the operator reports. "Another contact crossing behind. Range 16,000 yards. Hoover's voice remains calm. "Assign priority. Target the one crossing astern." "Aye, sir." On the Japanese cruiser Kinagasa, Captain Sakamoto Hiroshi grips the bridge rail as water fountains rise around his ship. The night is chaos. Flashes without source. Thunder without direction. "Where are they firing from?" he shouts. A junior officer shakes his head, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't see anything, sir. No muzzle flashes. No silhouettes." Sakamoto stares into the darkness, disbelief turning to dread. This isn't a battle. This is an execution. Another American salvo slams home. Shells tear into Kinagasa's midsection, blowing apart a torpedo mount and igniting fuel lines. Flames race across the deck. Men scream. The ship lists as damage control teams scramble blindly. "Hard rudder. Smoke screen." Sakamoto orders. But smoke only hides what you can already see. It is nothing against radar. Back on Helena, the gunnery officer's voice comes through the phone, almost casual. "Solution updated. Target steady. Request permission to fire." Hoover doesn't hesitate. "Fire." The guns speak again, methodical, relentless. Rogers feels each concussion through the deck plates, a deep, chest-thumping impact that never quite fades before the next one comes. "Enemy contact breaking off," the radar operator calls. Multiple ships retreating north. Hoover allows himself a thin smile. They've had enough. But not everyone is getting away. On Furitaka, fires rage uncontrollably. Steering is gone. Communications are dead. The ship wallows, helpless, a burning silhouette finally visible now that flames light her up from within. Lieutenant Tanaka crawls across the deck, hands slick with oil and blood, ears ringing. He looks up just in time to see another shell crash through the aft superstructure. The blast throws him flat. The night roars. From the American line, destroyers surge forward, launching torpedoes guided by radar cues and plotted intercepts. White wakes streak silently through the darkness. Seconds later, a massive detonation rips through the Japanese formation. A ship disappears in a rolling fireball. On Helena, someone exhales sharply. "My God!" Rogers doesn't look away from the radar. "This is what happens," he says quietly, "when one side knows where the other is and the other doesn't." The radar scope clears gradually. One by one, enemy contacts fade, some fleeing, some sinking, some simply gone. Hoover finally straightens. "Cease fire," he orders. "Hold position." The guns fall silent. Only the distant crackle of burning ships and the hiss of steam remain. Rogers looks out into the darkness again. Now he can see them. Wreckage. Fires. Men in the water. The night air smells of cordite and burning oil. And somewhere out there, surviving Japanese officers are staring into the same darkness, trying to understand how the Americans turned night into daylight. They mocked radar. They trusted their eyes. And now the sea around Guadalcanal is littered with the proof that the war has changed. Forever. October 12th, 1942. 5:18 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, off Guadalcanal. Dawn creeps in slowly, a thin gray light stretching across the water like a wound refusing to close. Smoke hangs low over the sound, drifting in long, oily ribbons that sting the eyes and coat the tongue. The sea is littered with debris, splintered planks, twisted metal, empty life jackets bobbing silently on the swell. On the bridge of USS Helena, Lieutenant Commander Rogers leans against the rail, exhaustion finally catching up with him. His ears still ring from the night's gunfire. His uniform smells of cordite and sweat. Below, sailors move quietly, stepping around spent shell casings and scorch marks burned into the deck. Gun barrels, still warm, point out toward the pale horizon like tired sentinels. Captain Hoover steps beside Rogers and peers out at the wreckage. "They'll see it now," Hoover says. "Yes, sir," Rogers replies. In daylight, a burned-out Japanese cruiser drifts half-submerged a mile off the starboard bow. Smoke coils lazily from shattered superstructure. A faint crackling sound drifts across the water as small fires eat through what remains. Men float in the water nearby, some clinging to wreckage, others motionless. Rogers swallows hard. "We never even saw them until after it was over," he says. Hoover nods. "That's the point." Below decks, in the radar compartment, operators finally remove their headsets. Red-rimmed eyes stare at scopes, now mostly empty, save for the slow sweep of land returned from Guadalcanal's jagged coastline. One of the younger operators breaks the silence. "Sir, they never got close enough to hit us properly." The chief radar technician exhales and rubs his temples. "Because they never knew where we were." Out on the water, American destroyers maneuver cautiously, picking their way through debris. A whaleboat is lowered to recover survivors. Sailors lower ropes to exhausted Japanese seamen, hauling them aboard in silence. No taunts, no cheers, just the grim aftermath of a one-sided night. A captured Japanese officer, soaked and shivering, stares at Helena's hull as he's pulled onto the deck of a destroyer. He looks up at the American ship, eyes wide. He whispers to himself, barely audible over the water. They fired without seeing. Back aboard Helena, Rogers glances toward the plotting table where radar tracks from the night before are still chalked faintly across the board. Clean lines, precise turns, enemy maneuvers mapped with clinical clarity. He gestures toward it. All of it, he says. Every move they made, we watched it happen. Hoover folds his arms. And they never knew. The realization settles in quietly. What happened last night wasn't just a victory. It was a revelation. Across the Sound, another American cruiser passes slowly, signal flags snapping in a morning breeze. A signalman raises binoculars, scanning the horizon for any sign of returning enemy ships. There are none. The Japanese force is gone, retreated, shattered, stunned. And somewhere far away, surviving commanders are replaying the night in their heads, struggling to reconcile what they believed about naval warfare with what the Americans just proved. Rogers looks back out at the water. "They trusted their eyes," he says softly. Hoover answers without hesitation. "And we trusted the math." The sun finally breaks through the smoke, casting harsh light over Iron Bottom Sound. It reveals the full cost of the night: burned hulls, floating wreckage, lives cut short. But it also reveals something else: a future. Because in the coming months, this technology, once mocked, dismissed, laughed at, will spread through the fleet. Better radar, faster computers, tighter coordination, and the Japanese Navy will feel its effects again. Soon, Rogers turns back toward the bridge, fatigue heavy in his limbs. "What happens next, sir?" Hoover's eyes stay on the horizon. "Next," he says, "they'll adapt." He pauses. "But they'll never laugh at radar again." October 13th, 1942, 2:14 hours. Aboard IJN cruiser Kinagasa, north of Guadalcanal. The night is quiet again, but not peaceful. Captain Sakamoto Hiroshi stands on the shattered bridge of Kinagasa, the smell of burned paint and ruptured fuel lines still clinging to the air. Emergency lanterns cast weak yellow pools of light across buckled deck plating. Somewhere below, damage control parties hammer and curse as they struggle to keep seawater out. The cruiser limps north at reduced speed, engines vibrating unevenly beneath Sakamoto's boots. Around him, officers speak in hushed tones. They never use star shells. No searchlights. No warning. Sakamoto grips the rail harder. "Because they didn't need to see us," he says quietly. An ensign steps closer, face pale. "Sir, the gunnery crews say the first shells hit before we even identified targets." Sakamoto nods once. He already knows. He saw it with his own eyes. Flashes appearing from nowhere. Salvos walking perfectly across the water. Shells landing with mechanical precision. Not skill. Not luck. Something else. Below decks, a wounded petty officer sits against a bulkhead, bandages soaked red. He stares at the floor, shaking. "They fired like they were standing right next to us," he mutters. "Like they could see through the dark." The word spread faster than any official report. Radar. The word moves quietly through the ship, passed in whispers between compartments. It had always been dismissed, an American curiosity. Too fragile. Too unreliable. Useful for spotting aircraft, perhaps, but not ships at sea. Certainly not in combat. Certainly not like this. In the wardroom, senior officers gather around a scarred table. Charts are spread out, corners held down by empty mugs. A junior lieutenant points at the plotted course. They opened fire at over 20,000 yards in total darkness. Another officer scoffs weakly. That's impossible. Sakamoto looks up sharply. It was impossible, he corrects. Until last night. Silence falls. Outside, the sea laps against the hull, indifferent to doctrine and pride alike. Sakamoto exhales slowly. We trained our entire careers to fight at night, he says. Optics, discipline, torpedoes, surprise. He taps the chart, and they took all of that away with a machine. One officer clenches his fist. The Americans fight like cowards. They hide behind equipment. Sakamoto's eyes flash. No, he snaps. They fight like engineers. The distinction stings. A signalman enters the wardroom, bowing sharply. Captain, message from Combined Fleet. Preliminary reports from Cape Esperance. Sakamoto takes the paper and scans it. Losses confirmed. Retreat ordered. Cause of engagement under review. He folds the message carefully. They don't understand yet, he says. The officers exchange uneasy glances. They will, Sakamoto continues. Because this wasn't an accident. He walks to the bridge window and looks out into the dark. The Americans did not get lucky. They were prepared. A pause. And we were blind. The cruiser shudders as a damaged turbine coughs. Somewhere far behind them, Iron Bottom's sound lies quiet again, already absorbing the wreckage of another night battle. Sakamoto knows what will happen next. Committees, investigations, denial, but also change. Because once a Navy learns it can be killed without being seen, it never forgets. And from this night forward, Japanese commanders will stop mocking radar. Not because they understand it, but because they fear it. November 12, 1942. 1:27 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, Guadalcanal. The sea is black again, but this time, everyone knows what that means. On the bridge of USS Washington, Captain Glenn B. Davis watches the horizon through binoculars he knows are useless tonight. The night is moonless, the air thick with rain and cordite residue drifting from earlier clashes near Henderson Field. The real fight isn't out there. It's happening inside the ship. Radar contact, multiple surface targets, the operator calls from below. Bearing 185, range 18,000 yards. Large displacement. Davis doesn't hesitate. All hands, general quarters. Prepare, radar-directed fire. The order ripples through the battleship like electricity. Below decks, fire control computers spin up, fed by SG surface search radar returns that draw crisp white shapes across dark scopes. Contacts separate, merge, turn, each movement tracked with ruthless clarity. Out there, Japanese ships are running a nighttime bombardment mission. Confident, aggressive, convinced that darkness still protects them. They are wrong. On the Japanese side, Rear Admiral Hiroaki Abe stands on the bridge of High, eyes straining against the rain and smoke. Searchlights ready. He orders, prepare illumination. A fatal habit, because the moment a Japanese searchlight snaps on, it becomes a beacon. On Washington, the radar operator's voice sharpens. Con, enemy battleship illuminated. Bearing steady. Davis turns to the gunnery officer. You have the solution. Yes, sir, comes the calm reply. Lock. Fire. Washington's 16-inch guns erupt. The night shatters. Shells the size of small cars tear through the rain, invisible until they strike high amidships. Steel peels back like paper. Fireballs punch upward. The battleship shudders violently, steering gear shredded in seconds. On High's bridge, Abe is thrown to the deck as the ship lurches. What hit us? Someone screams. Another impact answers the question. Radar-guided salvos walk up the hull with terrifying precision. No ranging shots, no guesswork. Just hit after hit after hit. Damage control teams rush blindly, overwhelmed by fires erupting faster than they can be contained. Abe staggers to his feet, rain plastering his uniform to his body. They're firing without light, he realizes aloud. The truth lands like a hammer. This isn't Cape Esperance anymore. This is Doctrine. Washington keeps firing. adjusting aim in real time as radar updates feed corrections faster than human reaction could ever match. Nearby, USS South Dakota struggles with electrical failures, momentarily blind. But Washington doesn't slow. She doesn't need help. On high, the rudder jams. Speed drops. Fires spread unchecked. The pride of the Imperial Navy is crippled in minutes. Not by torpedoes, not by daylight gunnery, but by invisible waves bouncing off steel. A Japanese officer shouts over the roar. "We can't see them." Abe answers bitterly. "They can see us." When Washington finally ceases fire, high is a floating inferno, dead in the water, condemned. Davis exhales slowly. "Mark that," he says. "This is the future." The radar operator nods, eyes fixed on the scope. For the Japanese Navy, Guadalcanal delivers the lesson Cape Esperance only hinted at. The night is no longer theirs. Darkness no longer protects experience, courage, or tradition. From now on, it belongs to whoever controls the unseen. And the Americans do. November 13th, 1942. For 06 hours. Aboard IJN battleship Kurashima, Iron Bottom Sound. The sea is still burning. Fires ripple across the water in long orange streaks, fed by ruptured fuel tanks and shattered hulls drifting in the current. Smoke hangs low, clinging to the surface like a second ocean. The night is no longer black. It's lit by destruction. On the bridge of Kurashima, Captain Iwasaki Shigenori grips the compass repeater as reports arrive faster than they can be processed. High is dead in the water. Steering gone. Multiple fires uncontrolled. Iwasaki closes his eyes for half a second. High, a battleship, crippled without ever seeing her killer. A signalman steps forward, voice tight. "Captain, we have radar warnings. American battleship contact. Range closing." The word still feels foreign on Japanese bridges. Radar. For years, it was dismissed as unreliable, too fragile, too technical, too dependent on electricity. Japanese doctrine trusted eyes, optics, human judgment. Tonight, those beliefs are collapsing in real time. "Can we see them?" Iwasaki asks. The lookout hesitates. "No, sir." Iwasaki exhales sharply. Then a flash, blinding white, erupts off the port quarter. Kirishima shudders as a massive shell punches through her upper works, tearing apart an anti-aircraft battery and killing the crew instantly. Steel screams. Shrapnel scythes across the deck. Another hit follows, then another. Each impact arrives without warning. No ranging shots, no gradual adjustment. Just precision violence delivered from the dark. On the American side, USS Washington glides silently, her radar scopes alive with motion. Fire control teams track Kirishima's evasive turns with clinical detachment. Target attempting to zigzag, the radar operator reports. The gunnery officer adjusts. Compensating. 16-inch guns fire again. Kirishima's forward turret explodes in a bloom of flame, her gun barrels snapping like matchsticks. The blast throws men across the deck. The ship lifts hard to port. Inside the bridge, Iwasaki slams into a bulkhead, ears ringing. They are correcting instantly, he realizes. There is no escape. No smoke screen thick enough. No maneuver sharp enough. No darkness deep enough. Radar sees through all of it. Damage reports pile up. Fire in turret 2. Engine room flooding. Communications down. Iwasaki stares at the shattered compass. For the first time in his career, he understands something terrifying. Japanese night-fighting doctrine, refined for decades, has become obsolete in a single battle. He turns to his staff. "Prepare to withdraw," he orders. His voice is steady, but his eyes betray the truth. They are already defeated. Kirishima tries to turn away, engine straining, but another American salvo finds her stern. The rudder jams. Speed bleeds away. From Washington's bridge, Captain Davis watches the target slow. "Cease fire," he orders finally. She's finished. Kirishima burns, drifting helplessly, condemned. As American ships fade back into the darkness, never fully revealed, the Japanese survivors stare at the empty sea. No silhouettes. No searchlights. No enemy in sight. Just destruction. Iwasaki grips the rail, knuckles white. This wasn't battle, he says quietly. This was execution. And in the smoking wreckage of Kirishima, the Imperial Japanese Navy learns the final lesson Guadalcanal has to teach. War is no longer decided by who sees first, but by who can see without being seen. November 14th, 1942. 9:22 hours. Rabaul Naval Headquarters, New Britain. Morning light filters through the open shutters of the operations room, cutting across cigarette smoke and spilled coffee on the map table. Red pins mark Japanese ship losses around Guadalcanal. Too many pins. Too close together. Rear Admiral Shigeru Fukudome stands with his hands braced on the table, eyes fixed on the cluster labeled Iron Bottom Sound. His staff officers wait in uneasy silence, knowing the numbers don't add up. A signals officer steps forward, holding a decoded after-action report. Sir, confirmation from surviving units. High lost. Kirishima lost. Multiple cruisers heavily damaged. No one speaks. Fukudome straightens slowly. How, he asks. In darkness, the officer replies. With radar-directed fire. The room tightens. An older captain scoffs reflexively. Radar? Again? American exaggeration. A lieutenant snaps back before thinking better of it. Sir, the survivors all say the same thing. They were hit before visual contact. Before searchlights. Before anything. Fukudome raises a hand for silence. He walks to the window and looks out toward the harbor, where damaged ships sit at anchor, scarred patch silent. Crews move sluggishly across decks, haunted by nights they can't explain. For months, Japanese officers had joked about American radar. A crutch, a toy, something to help amateurs find their way in the dark. Now those jokes feel poisonous. Fukudome turns back to the room. We underestimated it, he says flatly. An aide hesitates. Sir, if this technology works as reported, then our night tactics are compromised. Fukudome finishes. The word lands hard. Another officer steps forward. American ships fired accurately without illumination. They corrected instantly when targets maneuvered. Smoke had no effect. Fukudome nods grimly, because they were never aiming with their eyes. He gestures at the map. Cape Esperance was a warning, he says. Guadalcanal was the proof. Silence follows. Outside, an aircraft engine coughs to life. Inside, the Imperial Navy's confidence in darkness finally dies. Fukudome exhales slowly. We cannot dismiss this anymore. He looks around the room. From this moment forward, assume the Americans can see us at night. Several officers exchange nervous glances. One asks quietly, and if we cannot see them, Fukudome doesn't hesitate. Then we are already at a disadvantage. He turns back to the map and begins removing red pins. Lost ships, sunk ships, ships that will never return. Each pin clinks softly as it hits the tray. For decades, he says, we trained to own the night. He pauses. Now the night belongs to machines. The room absorbs the meaning. Japanese doctrine, built on optics, courage, and experience, is colliding with something colder, faster, and unforgiving. Electrons, waves, math. Fukudome straightens. Begin emergency reviews of night fighting doctrine. Investigate radar countermeasures. Emphasize evasive tactics. An aide whispers, Sir, do we even have comparable radar? Fukudome closes his eyes briefly. Not yet. That answer says everything. Outside the headquarters, the tropical sun climbs higher, indifferent to the shift happening inside. Because the Imperial Japanese Navy is no longer mocking radar. It is racing desperately to survive it. December 3rd, 1942, 22:18 hours. Aboard Aegean cruiser Nachi, Philippine Sea. The lights on Nachi's bridge are dimmed to near darkness, red bulbs casting long shadows across charts and tired faces. The sea outside is calm, deceptively calm. A thin cloud cover hides the moon, turning the ocean into a black mirror. Captain Kato Masao leans over the chart table, listening as the ship's navigator reports their course. Every few seconds, Cato glances toward the horizon, then back inside, an old habit that suddenly feels useless. He knows now what darkness can hide. A junior officer clears his throat. "Sir, radar sweep complete." Cato turns sharply. "Anything?" The officer hesitates. "Negative contact." Relief flickers across the bridge, then fades just as quickly. Negative contact doesn't mean safety anymore. It just means ignorance. For weeks now, Japanese ships have been operating under a new tension, one they don't fully understand. Orders from Rabaul and Truck emphasize dispersion, zigzagging, unpredictable courses. No more confident night runs. No more tight formations slicing cleanly through the dark. The Americans have changed the rules. Cato straightens and looks toward the lookout platform. "Double the watch," he orders, "and keep engines ready for emergency turns." "Aye, sir." Below decks, men whisper in passageways. Stories travel faster than signals. Ships exploding without warning. Battleships crippled before firing a shot. Cruisers hunted like animals in the dark. Radar. The word now carries weight, like a curse. In the gunnery control room, Lieutenant Fujimoto Kenji studies a crude plotting board. Their own radar set, a primitive, unreliable system, flickers weakly, its returns smeared and uncertain. "It's useless," a petty officer mutters. Fujimoto doesn't disagree. Compared to American systems, it's blind. A lookout's voice crackles over the sound-powered phone. "Bridge, faint noise bearing 080. Cato stiffens. "Noise. Possible engine vibration, sir." "Hard to tell. Hard to tell." Everything is hard to tell now. Cato knows the Americans could already be tracking them from beyond visual range, beyond hearing. Somewhere out there, a radar scope might already have Nachi painted clean and bright. He grips the rail. "All guns ready," he orders quietly. "But do not fire unless we have confirmation. Fire blindly, and you give away your position. Wait too long, and you never fire at all." The dilemma gnaws at him. Minutes pass. Nothing happens, but the tension doesn't break. Because the fear isn't of what you see. It's of what you don't. In the wardroom later, officers gather around lukewarm tea. Conversation is subdued. One lieutenant finally says it. "Sir, how do we fight an enemy we cannot see?" Cato answers honestly. "We adapt, or we die." Silence follows. The ship presses on through the darkness. Engines steady, wake barely visible. Somewhere far away, American ships prowl with confidence born of screens and circuits. Cato stares out into the Black Sea. For the first time in his career, he realizes something that would have sounded absurd just months ago. The enemy no longer needs the sun, and the Japanese Navy, once masters of the night, is now learning to fear it. January 29th, 1943. 0:47 hours. Blackhead Strait, Solomon Islands. The rain comes down hard, flattening the sea into a rippling sheet of black steel. Visibility is almost zero. No stars, no moon, no shoreline lights. Just the hiss of rain on water and the low thrum of engines pushing steel holes through the dark. On the bridge of USS O'Bannon, Lieutenant Commander Robert Haler wipes rain from his eyes and stares at a radar repeater glowing faintly beside the chart table. Green lines sweep in perfect rhythm. To the naked eye, the strait is empty. To the radar, it's crowded. 2 contacts, the radar operator reports. Small displacement. Bearing 095. Range 8,000 yards. Japanese destroyers. Haler doesn't need binoculars. He doesn't even look outside. "All guns stand by," he orders. "Maintain radio silence." O'Bannon slips forward like a predator, her engines throttled back, wake barely visible. Nearby, USS Fletcher mirrors her movement, both ships linked by radar plots and quiet confidence. Out in the rain, the Japanese destroyers Kuroshio and Oyashio race southward. Escorts for a supply run to Guadalcanal. Their crews strain at lookout posts, rain plastering uniforms to skin. They trust the darkness. They shouldn't. On Kuroshio's bridge, the captain squints into the rain. "Any sightings?" "Nothing, sir." Visibility near zero. A comforting answer, once. On O'Bannon, the radar operator leans forward. Con, target's closing. They're crossing our bow. Haler nods. Hold fire. Second stretch. The range ticks down. 6,000 yards. 5,000. The American destroyers maneuver silently, placing themselves in perfect firing position, guided by invisible waves bouncing off Japanese hulls. Fire control, solution ready, the gunnery officer whispers. Haler waits one more heartbeat. Fire. O'Bannon's guns erupt, orange flashes tearing holes in the rain. Shells smash into Kuroshio's superstructure, ripping apart the bridge and knocking out steering in seconds. On the Japanese ship, chaos explodes. What hit us? Engines full astern. Where are they? They can't answer the last question, because the Americans aren't visible. Fletcher joins in, her salvos slamming into a Yashio's bow, detonating forward magazines. The explosion lights the strait like lightning, revealing wreckage, but not attackers. The Japanese return fire blindly, shells crashing harmlessly into empty water. Too late, too slow, too blind. Haler watches the radar calmly. Targets breaking up, the operator reports. One contact dead in the water. Haler exhales. Cease fire. Disengage. The American destroyers turn away, slipping back into darkness as quickly as they appeared. Behind them, burning Japanese ships drift helplessly in the rain. On Kuroshio, survivors cling to railings, staring into blackness where death came from nowhere. The captain grips the chart table, voice hoarse. They saw us before we ever knew they were there. Rain washes across the deck, carrying blood toward the scuppers. Back on O'Bannon, Haler finally looks out into the night. Nothing to see, just darkness. And that is exactly how he wants it. Because now, the Americans don't fear the dark. They own it. February 15th, 1943. 21:36 hours. Combined Fleet Briefing Room, Truck Lagoon. The ceiling fans barely move the heavy, tropical air. Cigarette smoke hangs thick beneath the lights, turning the briefing room into a gray haze of frustration and disbelief. Around a long table sit senior officers of the Imperial Japanese Navy, men hardened by years of war, now worn thin by months of night defeats they cannot explain away. Rear Admiral Tamichi Hara stands at the head of the table, pointer in hand, gesturing at a chart of the Solomon Islands. Red grease pencil circles mark locations that have become painfully familiar. Cape Esperance, Guadalcanal, Blackhead Strait. Each circle represents ships lost in darkness. Every engagement shows the same pattern. Hara says, voice flat. The Americans open fire first. They achieve hits immediately, and they disengage before we can even identify them. A captain scoffs weakly. Luck, he mutters, or coincidence. Hara snaps the pointer against the table. No, he says sharply. Technology. Silence settles. An intelligence officer steps forward, holding a folder thick with intercepted reports. Our analysis confirms the Americans are coordinating surface search radar with fire control computers. Their gunnery solutions update in real time. Another officer clenches his jaw. So they are not aiming, he says bitterly. They are calculating. Hara nods. Our lookouts report no silhouettes, no searchlights, no star shells. The enemy does not need them. He points to a diagram of an American cruiser. Once radar contact is established, they fire without visual confirmation. A murmur ripples around the room. One commander leans forward. Can we counter it? The question hangs in the air longer than anyone likes. Hara exhales slowly. We are trying. He gestures to another chart. Japanese radar sets marked in small, uncertain circles. Our systems lack range, reliability, and integration. Worse, many captains still do not trust them. A lieutenant speaks up hesitantly. Sir, some believe radar makes crews complacent, that it weakens fighting spirit. Hara's eyes harden. Spirit does not stop shells. The words land like a slap. He turns back to the table. For decades, we trained to dominate night combat. We believed darkness favored courage, experience, and discipline. He pauses. Now darkness favors information. A low rumble of thunder echoes outside the bunker. Another officer speaks, quieter now. What if we avoid night actions entirely? Hara shakes his head. We cannot. Our supply lines depend on them. The Americans know this. He taps the map. They choose when and where to fight, because radar gives them that choice. The room absorbs the truth. Japanese ships are no longer hunters at night. They are prey. Hara sets the pointer down. This is not a failure of bravery, he says. It is a failure of adaptation. He straightens, and it is happening too late. The officers sit in heavy silence, the sound of ceiling fans and distant surf filling the void. Somewhere outside, ships prepare for another night sortie. Another run through darkness now ruled by unseen eyes. Hara gathers his papers. The Americans have turned the night into a weapon, he says. And we taught them how, by laughing at it. No one laughs now. March 6th, 1943. 23:18 hours. Aboard USS San Francisco, off the Solomon Islands. The bridge lights are dimmed to a faint red glow, just enough to read instruments without spilling light into the night. Outside, the Pacific is flat and black, a seamless void stretching to the horizon. There is no moon, no starlight, no reference points at all. Captain Charles H. McMorris stands beside the radar repeater, arms folded, eyes not on the sea, but on the screen. Green arc sweep. Returns bloom. Targets separate cleanly. The radar operator's voice is calm, almost bored. Surface contacts, bearing 120. Range 14,000 yards. Multiple ships. Formation consistent with destroyers. McMorris nods once. He doesn't reach for binoculars. He doesn't squint into darkness. He doesn't ask for confirmation. Plot and track, he says. Let the machines do the seeing. Below decks, in the fire control room, the Mark III radar feeds precise range and bearing data directly into the gunnery computer. Gears hum. Dials spin. Solutions update automatically as the unseen enemy turns. This is not Cape Esperance anymore. This is routine. On the Japanese destroyer Murasame, Lieutenant Yamada Katsu grips the rail as rain begins to fall again. The night feels heavier now, oppressive, hostile. Any sightings? The captain asks. Negative, Yamada replies. But, sir, the silence feels wrong. The captain doesn't answer, because he feels it too. Back on San Francisco, the radar operator speaks again. Targets maneuvering. They're zigzagging. McMorris exhales slowly. They're trying not to be predictable, he says. They learned something. He pauses. But not enough. He lifts the phone. Gunnery standby. We will engage on radar only. The reply comes back instantly. Solution ready. No tension. No hesitation. The guns fire. 8-inch shells scream into darkness, invisible until they strike. Moments later, a bright orange flash erupts far ahead, then another. On Murasame, the first hit slams into the engine room, killing power instantly. The deck tilts as steam bursts from ruptured pipes. Hit! We're hit! Where did it come from? Yamada stumbles, ears ringing, rain mixing with oil and blood. Another shell detonates near the bridge, shredding antennae and killing the helmsman. Orders dissolve into chaos. The captain shouts into the wind. Searchlights! Now! A beam snaps on, just for a second. And that second is enough. Back on San Francisco, the radar operator's voice sharpens. Target illuminated. McMorris doesn't raise his voice. Shift fire. Finish them. The next salvo walks perfectly across the destroyer's hull. Fire blossoms. Steel buckles. The ship slows, dying in the rain. On another Japanese destroyer nearby, officers watch in horror as their sister ship burns. They didn't miss once, someone whispers. Because they aren't guessing. They aren't hoping. They are calculating. Back on San Francisco, McMorris watches the radar contacts fade. Cease fire, he orders. The ship turns away, engines steady, slipping back into the void. Behind them, wreckage burns. McMorris finally looks out into the night. Nothing to see. That's the point. Because American ships no longer fight the night. They erase it. June 19th, 1943. 2041 hours. Imperial Japanese Navy Tactical Review Board, Tokyo. The room is immaculate. Polished floors, crisp uniforms, the faint smell of ink and cigarette smoke. Maps of the Pacific cover the walls, their colored pins rearranged, so often the felt beneath them has worn thin. Every pin tells a story. Too many of them end in loss. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome stands before a chalkboard filled with arcs, ranges, and hand-drawn radar cones. His pointer hovers, unmoving, as the assembled commanders wait. No one jokes anymore. Fukudome clears his throat. At the start of this war, he says evenly, "We believe American radar was unreliable. Crude. A substitute for experience." A few officers shift uncomfortably. He taps the board. Cape Esperance disproved that belief. Guadalcanal confirmed it. The Solomons perfected it. Silence answers him. A captain in the second row finally speaks. "Sir, are we certain radar alone caused these defeats?" Fukudome turns sharply. "Radar alone?" he repeats. He shakes his head. "No. Radar combined with discipline, centralized fire control, and doctrine." He gestures to a diagram of an American cruiser. The Americans stopped fighting ship to ship. They fight system to system. The phrase lands hard. System to system. Another officer murmurs, almost to himself. "Machines fighting machines." Fukudome nods. Our lookouts strain their eyes. Their machines see farther. Our gunners wait for flashes. Their computers fire first. Our captains maneuver in darkness. Their radar tracks every turn. He pauses. We are always reacting. A younger commander clenches his fists. "Then we must attack radar itself," he says. "Destroy antennas. Jam signals." Fukudome allows a thin smile. "We are trying," he says. "But consider this. Every American ship has radar. Every engagement strengthens their experience. Every night teaches them more." He lowers the pointer. Meanwhile, our captains still debate whether to trust the screen. The room tightens. One officer exhales sharply. "We mocked it," he says quietly. Fukudome meets his eyes. "Yes." The word is heavy. He turns toward the map and removes another pin, slowly. "This war began with confidence," he continues. But confidence does not stop shells. Outside the windows, Tokyo traffic hums faintly, far removed from iron-bottom sound and burning seas. Yet the consequences of those distant nights have reached this room. Fukudome straightens. "From this point forward," he says, "assume every American ship can see us. Always. No one objects. No one laughs. The mockery is gone, replaced by something colder. Acceptance. Fear." An aide enters quietly and whispers to Fukudome, handing him a dispatch. He scans it, then closes his eyes briefly. "Another night action," he says. "Another loss." He folds the paper. "The lesson has been written in steel and blood," he concludes, "and it cannot be erased." The officers rise slowly as the meeting adjourns. As they file out, none of them look at the chalkboard. They already know what it says. The Americans no longer fight in the dark. They own it. August 6th, 1943. 22:03 hours. Central Pacific, aboard USS Indianapolis. The Pacific is calm tonight, almost eerily so. The sea rolls in slow, glassy swells that reflect no light, no stars, no moon. To the naked eye, the horizon is nothing but a seamless curtain of black. On the bridge of USS Indianapolis, Captain Stewart S. Murray stands beside the radar console, hands clasped behind his back. The faint green glow of the screen paints his face in sharp angles, every sweep of the beam cutting through the darkness with mechanical certainty. "Surface contact," the radar operator reports. "Single large return. Bearing 040. Range 16,000 yards." Murray nods once. No excitement. No surprise. This is normal now. Below decks, fire control teams adjust dials with practiced ease. The Mark 8 fire control radar feeds continuous data into the plotting table, updating range and bearing dozens of times per minute. The system hums softly, steady, reliable. Out in the darkness, a Japanese transport steams westward, escorted by a lone destroyer. On its bridge, the captain peers through binoculars uselessly, eyes straining for something, anything to latch onto. Visibility? He asks. Nil, sir. He frowns. This route was chosen for darkness. For concealment. He does not know concealment no longer exists. Back on Indianapolis, the radar operator speaks again. Target altering course. Speed unchanged. Murray exhales slowly. They're nervous, he says. They know we're out here. They just don't know where. He turns to the gunnery officer. Hold fire, Murray orders. Track only. Minutes pass. The radar trace glides smoothly across the screen, each adjustment instantly mirrored in the plotting room. The American ship moves with confidence born not of eyesight, but of certainty. On the Japanese destroyer, the tension is thick. Lookouts whisper. Engines hum. Every shadow feels like a threat. Suddenly, a searchlight snaps on. A desperate move. The beam cuts across the sea and finds nothing. On Indianapolis, the radar operator stiffens. Target illuminated itself, he says. Murray doesn't hesitate. Fire. 8-inch guns erupt. The blast tears the night open, thunder rolling across the water. Shells arc invisibly and then strike. The Japanese destroyer explodes in light and flame. The bridge vanishes in a burst of steel and fire. Steering is lost instantly. The ship begins to list. On the transport behind it, men scream as shock waves roll across the deck. Where did it come from? We didn't see anything. They never will. Back on Indianapolis, Murray watches the radar return fragment. Clean, unmistakable. Destroyer neutralized, the operator reports. Murray nods. Shift fire. Cripple the transport. Another salvo slams home. The transport erupts in fire, slowing, then stopping altogether. Silence returns, broken only by distant burning. Murray steps to the bridge wing and looks into the night. Nothing. No enemy. No witnesses. No explanation. That is the new reality of naval war. The signal sees all. The eye sees nothing. Murray turns back to the console. This is how wars are fought now, he says quietly. Not by who looks harder, but by who listens better. The ship alters course and fades back into darkness. Radar still sweeping, still searching, still ruling the night. October 24th, 1943, 21:11 hours. Imperial Japanese Navy Gunnery School, Yokosuka. Rain taps softly against the tall windows of the lecture hall, a steady, almost polite sound that contrasts sharply with the tension inside. Rows of officers sit rigidly at their desks, uniforms crisp, faces tired. Chalk dust hangs faintly in the air. Captain Endo Masayuki stands at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, staring at a large blackboard covered in diagrams, arcs of radar sweeps, American cruiser silhouettes, range markers written in precise white lines. He does not look like a man about to deliver good news. Before the war, Endo begins, voice calm but edged with bitterness. Many of us believed American radar was unreliable. A few officers shift uncomfortably. Endo picks up a piece of chalk and taps the board. We said Americans relied on machines because they lacked night-fighting spirit. A pause. We were wrong. He draws a simple line, American ship. Then another, Japanese ship. Between them, a cone of radar waves. At Cape Esperance, he continues, they fired before visual contact. At Guadalcanal, they destroyed battleships without illumination. In the Solomons, they hunted destroyers in rain squalls. The chalk snaps in his fingers. The joke, he says quietly, stopped being funny when ships started exploding. An officer in the front row raises a hand hesitantly. Sir, could better training have prevented this? Endo meets his gaze. No. The word lands hard. This is not a failure of courage, or seamanship, or discipline, Endo says. It is a failure of assumptions. He turns and erases part of the board, replacing it with a new diagram. American radar linked directly to fire control computers. They do not wait to see, he says. They do not guess. They calculate. A murmur spreads through the hall. Another officer speaks up. Sir, is there any way to fight back at night? Endo considers the question carefully. Yes, he says. Do not be there. A few heads lift. He continues. Daylight, air power, submarines, ambush, anything but surface combat in darkness. The implication is brutal. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once feared as masters of night combat, must now avoid the very conditions it trained for. Endo lowers his voice. The Americans turned darkness into a weapon, he says, and we laughed while they were learning how. He gestures toward the windows, where rain streaks down the glass. Every night action since Guadalcanal proves the same truth, he continues. If you're on the surface at night, they know where you are. Silence grips the room. Endo sets the chalk down. Our sailors did not fail, he says firmly. Our thinking did. The officers rise slowly as the lecture ends. No one speaks. No one jokes. As they file out into the rain-soaked courtyard, the lesson follows them. Heavy, unavoidable. Radar was never a gimmick. It was a warning. And by the time Japan stopped laughing, the night was already lost. June 19th, 1944. 2:02 hours. Philippines Sea, west of Saipan. The ocean is wide and empty, stretching endlessly beneath a sky without stars. The wind is steady, warm, carrying the smell of fuel and salt across the decks of the American task force, cutting silently through the dark. On the bridge of USS New Jersey, Admiral Willisay, Lee stands beside the radar plot, hands clasped behind his back. The green glow of the scope reflects faintly off his glasses. Lines sweep. Contacts bloom. Fade. Reappear. This is no longer new. It is instinct. Surface picture is clean, the radar officer reports. No enemy contacts within range. Lee nods once. He remembers when this was different, when radar was questioned, doubted, treated as a supplement instead of the spine of naval combat. Those days feel ancient now. Somewhere far to the west, Japanese ships move cautiously, hugging daylight, avoiding the dark whenever possible. Orders have changed. Doctrine has changed. Behavior has changed. Because the night no longer forgives mistakes. Lee steps out onto the bridge wing and looks into the Black Sea. To his eyes, there is nothing, no movement, no shape, no threat. But inside the ship, the ocean is alive with information. Radar sweeps reach out miles beyond sight. Fire control systems stand ready, fed by constant streams of data. Every American ship in the formation shares the same picture, the same awareness. No confusion, no hesitation, no surprise. Below decks, sailors speak casually, quietly confident. They know something sailors before them never did. If an enemy appears, they will know first. They always do. Across the Pacific, the Imperial Japanese Navy now avoids surface combat at night whenever it can. When it cannot, it moves nervously dispersed, defensive. The bold night runs of 1941 are gone. The swagger is gone. So are many of the ships. Radar did not win the war by itself, but it decided who controlled the darkness. And once that control was lost, it was never regained. Lee exhales slowly. Funny thing about technology, he says quietly to no one in particular. It doesn't care what you believe. Behind him, the radar operator smiles faintly and returns his eyes to the scope. The sea remains calm. The night remains silent. But it is no longer neutral, because the war at sea changed the moment one navy stopped guessing and another kept laughing. Japanese commanders once mocked American radar. They called it unreliable. They called it unnecessary. They called it crutch. Then their ships began exploding. Not because the Americans were braver. Not because they were luckier. But because they learned how to see without being seen. The Pacific wind rolls across the deck as New Jersey cuts onward. Radar sweeping endlessly into the dark. The night is still there. But it no longer belongs to those who trust their eyes. It belongs to those who trust the signal.